Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Greg Ramsey. From the mind of George Lucas comes the third installment, perhaps the greatest science fiction story of all time, reuniting a legendary cast of characters who come together for one final stand against the forces of evil who threaten to destroy all traces of hope in the galaxy. We're talking about Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi was released in the United States on May 25, 1983, and follows The Empire Strikes Back, the highly acclaimed sequel to 1977's Star Wars, which was the first true blockbuster, the film that laid the foundation for an entire universe. Initially entitled Revenge of the Jedi, Return of the Jedi was the next chapter in the story of the heroic Rebel Alliance versus the evil Galactic Empire, in a war that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The Empire's primary tool of destruction from Star Wars, the Death Star, was under construction once again, and the Rebels were determined to prevent its completion. In the opening act, fans saw the rescue of Han Solo, who was frozen in carbonite at the dramatic end of The Empire Strikes Back. This rescue brought Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Princess Leia back together and reinvigorated the Rebel Alliance, who had obtained information on the Empire's new Death Star. The Empire's latest offensive was made all the more ominous by the first physical appearance of the Emperor, who joined Darth Vader as the primary antagonist of the film. The character of Luke Skywalker evolved from an impetuous young apprentice into a confident Jedi, anxious to face his destiny as Darth Vader's son. Han Solo and Princess Leia joined Lando Calrissian as generals in the Rebel Alliance, setting the table for the conflict to come. The movie also saw the introduction of the Ewoks, a primitive species that lived on the forest moon of Endor, which was the location of the Death Star's shield generator. The main struggle in the film centered on Luke Skywalker as he eventually faced Vader in the final act. Armed with the knowledge that Vader was not the only family he had, Luke was determined to overcome the Emperor's nefarious plan to turn him to the dark side. But little did he know that there was much more to the Emperor's schemes than he could possibly imagine. Return of the Jedi is considered by many critics and fans to be a fitting end to the Star Wars saga. The film has grossed nearly $476 million worldwide and received numerous Academy Awards, making it one of the most successful science fiction films of all time. Its influence is still being felt today, and for many fans, it is one of the most memorable chapters in the legendary Star Wars story. And that's the lowdown on Return of the Jedi. So we come to the final chapter of the trilogy. And you know you have a hit on your hands when your property, your product is known by one word that everybody, including fans, critics, reviewers, and everyone alike, pretty much all know the word. And in this case, it's the trilogy. Every time I hear the word, the trilogy, I think of Star Wars. Now it can be, several different movie productions, several different properties, because more than one film at this point obviously has more than one part. But once upon a time, when you said the word trilogy, there you could only be talking about Star Wars, right? So that's sort of where I'm at in my head. And even to this day, when I hear the word trilogy, it's Star Wars. Return of the Jedi has not exactly received the critical acclaim that Empire did, and certainly not the critical acclaim that the first Star Wars has. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm sure we'll touch on those in the episode this time. But as we all know, fan culture in this day and age can be very resentful, can be very hypocritical, can be a little too harsh at times, because for whatever reason, especially when it comes to Star Wars, the fan base can be as toxic as anything you've ever seen and heard. And it's unfortunate. I hate that it's like that. But, you have to look at this thing from a realistic point of view, which is what we try to do here on the show. However, that's not to say we're going to let this thing bog us down, because any one of you that have ever listened to the show before know that Greg and I are true fanboys and that we grew up on this stuff. So, yes, we will be realistic with what we give you today, but we're also going to give you the plain truth. And the plain truth of the matter is that Return of the Jedi is a classic film. So, Greg, I know we're just getting started. We haven't even begun to break this film down. But in terms of where you view this amongst the trilogy itself, where do you rank Return of the Jedi in these three films?
Well, I think it's got to go number 3. You know, I put Empire first. I think we both do. We're in agreement in that.
Yes.
And Episode 4 probably comes second. So, yeah, Return of the Jedi, it's number 3, but it's a really close number 3 to number 2 and number 1. It really, you know, it's a fitting end conclusion to this awesome trilogy, the best trilogy ever. It's unmatched, unequaled. And like you said, when you mention the word trilogy, you should automatically think of the original Star Wars films. And I like the fact that, you know, they changed the name Revenge of the Jedi to Return of the Jedi, because you don't want that association of a Jedi going out for revenge. I think I've recalled you saying about the Jedi, they're not out seeking a fight. They're out to, you know, defend if they have to, but they're not going to go looking for a fight. So I'm glad they changed the title there. That was a really good start.
And we know the word revenge came back later in the next set of films, and it did become part of the canon of the Star Wars universe because we had Revenge of the Sith. So, yeah, they worked it back in. But, dude, that happens a lot in this universe. There'll be things that were, you know, say written in a novel back in the 70s that somehow find their way into canon for the regular mainstream Star Wars universe. Because basically, these creators, this assembly of creators in this universe, they reuse material all the time. They don't really throw anything away. They make use of all the scraps. And that's a good and a bad thing. I think at times it just depends on what the thing is that you're talking about. I agree with you. I don't think it should have been Revenge of the Jedi. I do think they made the right move here. And I'm also in agreement that this is a very close number 2. And sometimes even close number 1. You know, the issue with sequels, and it's not just Star Wars, but it's any sequel that you're talking about. The issue is fan expectation versus reality, right? So we have it in our heads how a sequel should look, what the next logical step in the film should be. But then we get the actual film and we're like, it's not living up to what I expected. It's really hard for anyone, folks, from George Lucas to Steven Spielberg, you know, to anyone at this point in time, to honestly come through 100% with exactly what you expect. I mean, you and I both have had that opinion of a lot of the Marvel movies where we walk away from them going, wow, that was exactly what I expected, exactly what I wanted. But the guy sitting next to us in the theater may not have felt that way, because it's all subjective, as we've said countless times in the past. And speaking of Marvel, you're right when you say that Star Wars Trilogy is the trilogy. But brother, I'll tell you this. If any other trilogy could have held up, just imagine if Infinity War had a third film. If there was Infinity War, something in the middle, and then Endgame. I mean, in my opinion, those three could have given the Star Wars trilogy a run for its money. That's not the universe we live in. That's not what we got. But in terms of the grand scale, the storytelling, the acting, and all the above, including special effects and everything else involved, I think it could have given Star Wars a run for its money. But the Star Wars universe set the table for trilogies, set the table for sequels. I mean, these guys did it right. And honestly, there's filmmakers today trying to mimic what Lucas did with Star Wars, yes?
Oh, yes. He set the bar. And, you know, when you set the bar that high, it's really hard to try and match what he did. And it's almost impossible. But I'm in agreement with you about the Marvel, you know, cinematic universe, what they did with Infinity War and Endgame. If that had a third film somewhere in there, yeah, it would have really given Star Wars, the original trilogy, a big run for its money. And, you know, of course, I think I mentioned on the Endgame podcast that we did that has become my favorite movie of all time. And it really, it's hard to say that it trumped Empire for me, but I think it does.
And I was in agreement with you, and I still am to a large degree, but after having watched Jedi the past day and a half, to sort of get back into the Star Wars way of thinking. Let's be honest, kids. I'm kind of always in the Star Wars way of thinking, but it's nice to have a refresher at times. But putting myself back in this universe, man, I'm sitting here right now watching it again, looking at R2 and 3PO, and I'm like, God, it's hard for me to pull against these guys. It's hard for me to vote against them ever. So I agree with you, but when I'm immersed in the Star Wars universe, it's hard for me to see anything else, to be honest with you. So I actually have to, end the film, let the credits roll, and then get back to everyday life and go, okay, I still love Marvel. Marvel's that's my jam. That's what I love the most. But yeah, it's, and I'm conflicted on this stuff. I'm not as conflicted on Jedi as some people out there are. Those cats who say that Jedi, it paled by comparison to Empire. It didn't live up to it. It wasn't what Star Wars was, and this, that, and the other. And I don't know. There are moments during another viewing of this film where I can kind of see where a lot of that is coming from, if I'm being brutally honest. I can kind of see it. And it doesn't mean I'm picking it apart. It doesn't mean I'm, destroying it critically. But I can kind of see where they're coming from in terms of, okay, this could have been a little bit better, whatever. But it's a classic. And I don't know if it's a classic because of just time or because of our fascination with this universe from when we were kids. Maybe it's a combination of all the above. Maybe that's it. But before we dive into this today, man, I got to ask you, were you as satisfied upon watching this film again? Were you as satisfied with this film in terms of what it should have been, what it could bring to the table, or do you feel like there was something they left maybe undone?
I think I'm extremely satisfied just watching it again previously before the show. I went through a lot of emotions. There's Harrison Ford coming back as Han, and he's got a lot of comic relief, that stuff you come to expect from his character. And he made me laugh a lot in this film, which he did in the previous two, but I think more so in this one. And of course, his character has grown and evolved. He's no longer that guy that's not willing to put his neck out there for his friends and the rest of the team. He's become kind of like a leader almost. And I really like the fact, I like the way they did his character. I thought it was great, and I'm glad that they didn't listen to him and kill him off earlier in the trilogy. That would have been a real tragedy.
Right.
But yeah, I thought it was extremely satisfying watching it again, and some of the scenes made me tear up. When Yoda's on his deathbed and he's talking to Luke, that really got to me. And of course, near at the end, that one really, I had a runny nose. My sinuses were stopped up. I love a film that does that, man. And I can get into this. It never gets old. I will always cry during those scenes now.
You hear that, kids? Greg's just a big blubbering mess of tears. That's what he is. So it's all good, man. I get emotional in a lot of these films too. I do. And, I got a little emotional watching something else yesterday in preparation for this. We'll get to that in another show. But, yeah, man, I'm with you 100%. There's a lot of this stuff that still touches me to this day, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm just such a mark for this stuff. I'm such a fanboy, and I've got such a tremendous place in my heart for this stuff. I was kind of an aside. I was on a conference call recently for a business project I'm tackling at the moment. And there's all these guys on this Zoom conference call, video call, right? There's all these guys on there, and they're all looking pretty respectable, and they've got different backgrounds behind them. They're obviously in an office. They're, maybe in their living room, they've got a blank wall, or they've got some kind of art. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here with pop vinyls behind me, Wolverine, the Punisher, the Beatles, Star Wars, Batman, all this stuff hanging behind my head on the wall. And I'm like, yeah, I look like the 16-year-old in this little conference call, but hey, man, it's who I am. And listen, I would assume that you couldn't imagine me not being that guy, just like I couldn't imagine you not being that guy. It's just who we are, and I guess the phrase, you can't help who you are, that's not true. You can always work on yourself, and you decide one day, I'm no longer going to be into this. I'm going to change, do something different. Yeah, sure. But at my core, I'm a fanboy. And I guess you could honestly say that my experience with fandom began with Star Wars. And, yes, I was into comic books at a very young age, but remember, I saw the first Star Wars in a theater, and that was 1977, and I saw it. And dude, I don't know which came first at this point, comic books or Star Wars. Maybe they're a close tie. I don't know. Close 1 and 2, maybe, perhaps. But yeah, man, for me, Return of the Jedi is just as good today as it ever was. And you and I both have the despecialized editions, the original studio versions, as, the way nature intended, the way God wanted you to see them, folks. Forget all this other added special effects and nonsense. Complete garbage. Sorry, it's how I feel. But
yeah, and let me just make a comment real quick before we get into, the film. You're talking about these conference calls where you see the person's background, what they have on their shelf or the wall. If I didn't know you and I was in this conference call with you and these other guys, let me just say that you would be the one guy that I would want to, talk to and get to know better. You'd be, cut from the same mold as me, I guess you could say. So, yeah, there's nothing to be ashamed of there. Some people just, they don't get it like we've talked about. And some people kind of like to hide it. It's whatever. But I think I would like to get to know you better if I didn't already.
Hey, man, birds of a feather, right? Birds of a feather. I'm just saying. So, yeah, man, it's all good. Like I said, I'm a big kid. I'm the first one to admit it. Family, friends, everybody that knows me knows that. So, but yeah, man, we're here for Star Wars, and I want to talk all day because I've really enjoyed doing the first 2 films, and we've talked at length about the possibility of tackling the Disney trilogy. We might do that at some point, but right now today we're celebrating the 3rd and final act in what we believed was going to be the only set of stories told about this universe and from this universe. So let's kick this thing off, man. So the first thing we see is Vader. And I find it interesting, again, that we kicked the movie off as we kicked off the first Star Wars. And I believe how we kicked off Empire also, in space, when you get a shot of space itself. And you've got a Star Destroyer, a couple of Star Destroyers, maybe 2 or 3 actually, if I'm not mistaken. And we get to see the big bad of the film, Vader. And he is visiting what looks to be a rebuilt Death Star. Now, dude, I can't remember back to 1983 in terms of if I was surprised by this, and I also can't remember if they, released the fact that there was a second Death Star in the previews. But man, what an image to see this thing being rebuilt. And this is one of the reasons why, in a lot of ways, Jedi comes full circle from the first Star Wars, because we began with the Death Star, and we're wrapping up with the Death Star again. We see Vader. He's visiting this monstrosity of thing. I mean, it looks like to be maybe 75-80% built. So it's a project in the making. It's progress, right? I suppose you could say. Terrible progress. This thing's a star killer. No pun intended. So we see Vader, and of course, he sees the officers. This guy's not happy to see him. He's scared to death. And we'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. I don't think Vader force-choked anybody in this film, which is pretty shocking to me. I don't remember there being a force choke of any kind by this guy this time.
Yeah, I was shocked by that as well, now that you mention it. And I think it's got maybe something to do with possibly what comes at the end of the film, with Vader feeling sympathetic. He's maybe feeling that human side of himself is starting to creep in. And this is the only way I guess this is the only way he can express it, by, trying to deviate from, choking out the officers, because I think, as we said in episode 4, if he chokes any more out, they're going to run out of officers, and who's going to run the fleet, and who's going to run the ship,
Right.
Yeah, like you said, it starts off with Vader. That's how episode 4 started off. And they've got the reconstruction of the Death Star, which, maybe you could say it's like an angry hornet's nest being built, the process
Right.
going on through there. Because the Empire, yeah, it's big, it's bad, it's like an angry hornet's nest, and you don't want to mess with it.
Oh, a great analogy, man, for sure. And one of the funniest parts here, one of the funniest bits about this opening scene that we get is when he tells him that the Emperor is coming. And this officer just looks like he may have just wet himself. He's like, the Emperor's coming here? Like, and it's like the scene in Spaceballs when, Dark Helmet takes the ring out. And the officer's like, oh, shit. Right? So, please, no, not that. It's kind of the same thing, man. But yeah, basically Vader lets Caliban says, guess what? The big boss is coming. So look busy. So yeah, and Emperor's on his way. And it's pretty cool because we've never seen the Emperor in a physical form in this universe. We've only seen him in a hologram, a 3D projection. We saw it in Empire. And I think he may have mentioned the Emperor in the first Star Wars, but I can't recall that. We got a sort of a look at him in Empire, but now we get the full guy from head to toe.
The Emperor's coming for the big inspection. It's kind of like being in the Army or the military. When you have to prepare for your superiors. It's that nerve-wracking, I'm sure. And you can see Commander when he notices Vader's coming. He swallows. That's right. Just as if to say, "Oh no, here we go again. Am I going to live through this?" And when the Emperor gets there, let me just say this guy kind of puts me in the mind of what the Grim Reaper might look like.
Oh, yeah.
I had images of the Grim Reaper. And also, remember the film Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey? The Grim Reaper really puts me in the mind of what the Emperor looked like in Return of the Jedi. So, yeah, this movie inspired a lot of stuff from films to come then on, sci-fi and stuff. But, yeah, I would not want either Vader nor the Emperor to be disappointed in me. I would want to try to do everything possible to please those guys.
Just imagine the Emperor showing up with a white glove. It's like, look at this. There's too much dirt on this machine. They're like, oh, crap, we're screwed. I told you to clean that up. So, yeah.
I hope your insurance is paid up, right?
Vader's like, I'm so sorry, Master. And he's like, oh, forget this. This is ridiculous. You're all fired. Like he doesn't really kill anyone. He's like, I'm very disappointed. Like that would have been so great, So, if Mel Brooks, if you're listening, okay, if any of the Mel Brooks production people, if you're ever looking for the next great Spaceballs comedy, you might have your writer right here. So we'll be able to tackle it. So yeah, we see Vader. We know trouble's ahead. We go to Tatooine. You talked about callbacks from the first Star Wars. We're getting a big one here. This is the planet where Luke was raised. Not where he was born, kids, but where he was raised. We all know. Well, we didn't know he wasn't born here. That comes much later. So it comes in the next trilogy, which, guess what? We're not going to talk about that. So anyway, we're back to Jedi. Welcome back, folks, to Jedi. So yes, we're back to Tatooine. This is where Luke came of age, and it was the one planet he tried his best to get off of most of his life, and now he's forced to come back because we see R2 and 3PO. They are the mascots of this story. They are your way in as a child. They're your way in. And Han is great, and Luke is great, but if you're a little kid, R2 and 3PO are sort of your door into this universe. And they're as great as ever. Kenny Baker, of course, Anthony Daniels, doing what they do. Great to see these two characters back in action again. They're there at Jabba's palace, and you're kind of like, whose decision was to throw these two to the wolves? Because they come in, they're greeted by Bib Fortuna, and Bib's trying to sweet talk him, and R2's like, no, basically, I've got this thing, I can only show it to Jabba. They're shown to Jabba, and now we get our first look at Jabba the Hutt, and man, is he a little overweight. So...
Yeah, but we always wondered what Jabba would look like, and I think nobody anticipated the image that we got. Yeah, and originally I think Han was supposed to have been something like what Jabba turned out to be, right?
I think so. Yeah, Han was supposed to have been a 7-foot tall lizard, like green skinned monster, is what the original Han Solo was supposed to be. So he had jagged teeth and pointy ears, and yeah, I mean, just imagine that Star Wars. We talked about this before in Empire, I think. Imagine what Star Wars could have been, had they went forward with the original ideas and the original artwork and whatnot. But yeah, that would have been a much different movie for sure. Don't know if Princess Leia would have been falling for Han as hard as she did. So running in sheer
Yeah.
terror, more like.
It's a familiar setting with C-3PO and R2 strolling through the desert of Tatooine and heading towards Jabba's lair to try and make a deal somehow. But yeah, to find out that Luke sent the two droids to try and make this deal, or to try to get on Jabba's good side. Yeah, it's kind of strange, but then again, Luke's come a long way. He's got a plan. We don't possibly know this yet, but he and R2 have that really strong connection. C-3PO is like scared. He doesn't really want to go in. He's hesitant. R2's just going headstrong in, and like maybe Luke would have done in the first film. So there's a connection between Luke and R2, and yeah, they go up to meet the massive Jabba the Hutt, and he's not a pretty sight.
That's right, and good point about R2. R2's fearless. C-3PO's terrified. So it's a nice mix of personalities with these two droids. We see the Gamorrean guards, who are like the pig guards. I love the way they look. They're some of my favorite looking aliens in the Star Wars universe. I just love the aesthetic. I just love how they look. So yes, we get to see Jabba in all his bloated glory, and R2 projects the 3D image of Luke, and for the first time ever, we see Luke Skywalker as a Jedi Knight. He's clothed all in black. Mark Hamill is he's got a respectable haircut now, folks. No longer the brash young foreign boy from Tatooine that we saw in the first Star Wars. He looks great, and he's much more mature, and he's older, and he's wiser. A full circle evolution for this character. He has grown, and we're just getting our first glimpse of it here. And he's basically telling Jabba, look, you got my buddy, you kick him loose, or there's going to be hell to pay. And Jabba has a nice laugh at that and thinks it's hilarious. And the aliens around him, his crew, are having a hearty laugh at it. And yeah, it's we don't know where it's going to go from here, but he references Han, and Jabba basically says, I'm not going to give up my favorite wall decoration, my favorite trophy. And we see on the wall the block of carbonite from the end of Empire that Han was frozen in. We see Harrison Ford's image into this slab of carbonite, and you're like, oh my God, there he is. And you see the lights on the side of the carbonite, so you know he's not dead. You assume those are life functions. So I don't know if I could tell you as a kid what I was thinking here, but the minute I saw Luke, I thought, all right, everything's going to be okay here, because he must have a plan. He must be on the way. Let's see what happens. And the bit when he tells Jabba that, I offered you a gift, these two droids, and 3PO says, what did he say? It's so great.
Yeah, I love the image that Luke projects in his entrance into this film. He is a man now. He has nearly become the Jedi that he wanted to be back in Episode 4. He still has a little bit of business to take care of, as Yoda, tells him later on. But yeah, the black, the haircut. I mean, he just looks wiser, and he shows it. He's not that brash kid anymore who's going to make rash decisions. He has a plan, and he's very confident. You can see the confidence oozing from him, and he comes in, with kind of like a Trojan horse attitude with Jabba. He's willing to make peace, if Jabba will just listen. So again, we see that mentality of the Jedi. They're gonna go try to go the peaceful way, if before all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, you're right. Very much a Trojan horse, because he's offering peace, but he's got the weapon, and the weapon is himself. He's the weapon, and he's, if you cross him and you don't give him what he wants, Luke's going to make everything, it's going to start going down. It's going to happen right then. So, yeah, we do see, before we see Luke now, folks, we get to see another reappearance of one of the primary cast characters, and that's Princess Leia herself. She comes in disguised as a bounty hunter. She's got Chewbacca in shackles, and again, another throwback to Episode 4, when they had Chewbacca, sort of handcuffed. Luke and Han did, dressed as stormtroopers. So another nice little callback. So Leia in the bounty hunter disguise, well, of course, we didn't know at the time it was Leia, wants 50 grand. Jabba offered 10, and she's got a thermal detonator, and the whole place goes nuts. So Jabba agrees to 35, and that's all he's going to give her. So she takes it. We see in the background Boba Fett. He's the man responsible for getting Han back to Jabba to begin with. And as much as we love Boba, he's not a good guy. So we get our glimpse of him. He's not going to last long in this film, kids. Spoiler alert. Not going to make it very long. So one of the next scenes that we get here is it's nighttime. Everything's calmed down. This bounty hunter, for whatever reason, is releasing Han from the carbonite. And we see for the first time Harrison Ford, the actor himself, in his physical form. And he's freezing, and she's telling him, you're suffering from the carbonite freezing. It'll take some time. And he says, I can't see. She says, your eyesight will return in time. And he says, who are you? She takes off the mask, and she says, someone that loves you. And, the someone that loves you part is appropriate because I still love this girl. And I loved her then. I love her now. She's amazing. So good to see Princess Leia back here. Did you have any idea in the world that this bounty hunter was somebody we would end up knowing?
None whatsoever. This was a great surprise when she took off her helmet and it was Princess Leia. I was like, oh man, what a great surprise. And it was just great to see, I'm glad they did that, because when I first saw it, I thought it was strange. This bounty hunter is coming in to try and steal Jabba's great prize, his ornament, which probably go on the top of his Christmas tree. I don't know if he had one.
That's a big tree.
And yeah, now watching it, as a grown up, I just kind of got the feeling, what if? I'm just saying, what if this bounty hunter was trying to steal Jabba's great prize, and maybe force him to try and buy it back? I don't know. That's just a little what if there.
Yeah, interesting. You could have went a couple different ways here. It could have been something else altogether. It didn't even occur to me how short this bounty hunter was. It never occurred to me. But then when you realize it's Leia, you're like, holy crap, I should have seen this coming.
This also calls back to Episode 4. Remember when Han and Luke have to go save Leia? Leia returns the favor here and saves Han, which with help from Luke, of course, eventually a little bit later on. So I like that callback. Oh,
great point, man. And Han and Luke are dressed as stormtroopers, and she's dressed as a bounty hunter.
Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah, well done. So yes, we are now getting the third member of the original cast, the core cast, the Holy Trinity of the Star Wars universe. The Jedi Knight himself, Luke Skywalker, shows up. So he shows up. He pretty much does his Jedi mind trick stuff on Bib Fortuna, who lets him into the palace. Jabba's all ticked off. Dude, I told you not to let him in here. Yes, that's what he really said. So Luke is there, brimming with confidence. He is not scared at all. I mean, he's as stone-faced can be. Little cocky maybe in his confidence, but he's got nothing to fear because he knows the power he possesses thanks to the Force. And in front of him, chained to Jabba, because, he killed his slave girl earlier. Jabba's got another slave girl. If you need another reason to fall in love with Princess Leia, you got it here, because it's Leia in the slave costume.
Yeah, wow.
I'm sorry, the best moment of any film ever made, bar none, is Carrie Fisher in the slave costume. Give me another one. Too late, you can't, because this is awesome.
Yeah, if she didn't look great before, man, she is out of this world sexy in this costume. And man, as a kid, I saw this and I was like, whoa. It's like, Princess Leia, she's pretty, she's beautiful, but now she's sexy, and she's just driving me crazy.
Yeah, dude, I was 10 years old when this movie came out, and I became a man on that day. So, yeah. I learned about life. I learned about love. I learned about women. Thanks for Return of the Jedi. So, yeah. So it goes down here. This starts to move pretty quick as this happens. Again, as we said, Luke's full of confidence. 3PO is trying to warn him that you're standing on, and I guess the rest of the sentence was going to be trapdoor, because eventually Luke decides to try to lash out at Jabba. Jabba gives the command. The floor gives out from underneath of him. And yes, Luke has to face the same monster that we heard previously but didn't see. This is the Rancor. It's a big, nasty beast, and would give King Kong a run for its money in terms of a fight, I'm sure. So Luke actually gets the better of this thing. And I thought one of the most curious moments of this entire film was how upset they all were, including the two guards. And we assumed the monster's handler that was down the pit. And they're both crying and like we openly weeping over the death of this thing. I'm like, what? So
yeah, he's like a blubbering idiot, man. He's got guys there consoling him, and I thought that was weird too. I mean, it's just like, man, why are you so upset over this, this giant monstrosity of a creature?
Yes, absolutely. And we can't forget that Chewbacca and Han are reunited before this goes down, which was very cool to see. Chewbacca's very emotional. To Han, it's been a few minutes, I guess. And I don't know if they actually told us how much time has passed between Empire and Jedi in terms of their timeline. You could say a few months. You could say a week. I mean, Luke obviously looks different, but because they age with time. Everyone ages. Newsflash, kids, we're all getting older, right? So I don't know if they really ever told us how much time had passed here. So to Han, it's been a few minutes. They put him under and he's right back up. So I mean, obviously he's happy to see Chewbacca, but Chewbacca's overjoyed to see him again.
Yeah, the two close friends, lifelong pals are back together. And you can also say that slowly but surely the band is getting back together, the whole cast. I mean, yeah, it's all coming together. And I want to go back to before Luke falls down the shaft, another nice tribute to Episode 4 when Han says, lightsaber is never a match for a good blaster. Luke goes for a blaster. He uses the Force, and a blaster comes into his hand. He's going to try to use it against Jabba, but it's too late. He falls down into the pit. So another nice tribute, I thought.
Yeah, good call, man. I actually didn't even think about that. It is curious that he would go for that. But, then again, he came in with no weapons. So he would have to have done something because R2 had his saber the whole time, and we didn't know that. We wouldn't know it until later. So, yes, Luke kills the Rancor, and then they're found out. It's now daytime on Tatooine again. The high temp today is 143 degrees, which means we're all going to be dead within the hour. Very hot, this planet. Very hot. So they are on the desert skiff. They've made R2 a service droid. He's actually serving drinks on the sail barge. So, yeah, he's found his calling, folks. That's what he's done. So Han and Luke and Chewbacca are going to be sacrificed to the great and almighty Sarlacc. And it's the Sarlacc pit out in the middle of the desert, which we've never seen before. Amongst all of these scenes that we're talking about has been the return of Lando Calrissian, who's been dressed as a guard. And we can't leave out the great Billy D. Williams here, folks. He is there. As we know, at the end of Empire, he and Chewbacca left to go find Han. So we would have to assume that, yes, they had went to Tatooine, they knew he was going to Jabba, and they found his palace and then communicated back to Leia and Luke, who made plans to join them there. So that brings us up to speed, and then we get the big fight. R2 shoots the saber out of the top of his dome. Luke catches it. Han is not as convinced as Luke is that everything's going to be okay. He's like, I'm taking care of everything. He's like, great. Okay. All right. Great kid, whatever. So we know that Boba is there. And Han's blind and accidentally been, Chewbacca tells him Boba Fett's here. And he's like, Boba, where? And he accidentally hits him in the rocket pack. And then Boba Fett, for whatever reason, on this planet that I still don't know about, can't figure out why, and it still ruins me to this day, George Lucas freaking kills Boba Fett. And I'm like,
yeah, I know.
What?
Yeah, yeah, that was tough. That was tough to swallow because Boba Fett was becoming one of the coolest bad guys in the Star Wars universe. So yeah, it's kind of hard to watch him go down into the mouth, the jaws of the beast there, I guess you could say. And let me just say that before this whole thing takes place, I still get goosebumps as Luke's, getting ready to, I guess, jump off the diving board there and go into the deep end. He gives that little, two-finger salute, let you know it's like, well, here we go. And everything's going to be all right. But, yeah, after watching this once and then going back and watching it again, I get goosebumps. This is the greatest escape scene in a movie ever. I think I remember posting that on Facebook one time, and I was proud of it because I think it's true. I think it's true, man. It's so awesome the way things happen in this, and sometimes things are accidental, but it's okay. It's great. It just adds to the scene.
Yeah, it was. They looked like I mean, there was no way for them to get out. There was no other vehicles around. They could have jumped into the sand, I suppose, but what do you do then? You can't really go anywhere. They would have just shot you had you jumped. And plus, they're over the Sarlacc pit, so if you had jumped, you probably would have rolled downhill anyway. So yeah, it looked like they weren't going to be able to get out of this. And, talk about losing your breath and getting choked up in this film. That's what happens to Jabba, because Slave Girl Leia has had enough. And she decides to choke him out. So yeah, she does her best Taz, and Jabba's a dead Hutt.
Yeah, and another callback in the original film, Luke's got Leia there, and they swing across on that rope. That's so sweet, man. He says, come on, and man, yes.
You're right. It is definitely a callback, dude. You're pointing out a lot of stuff here that I know. And some maybe I hadn't even put together. So yeah, well done. But before we move on from Boba Fett's eulogy here, I gotta say, I had the same feeling when they killed Darth Maul, and I'm like, what? What is he dead? What do you mean he's dead? I mean, they brought Darth Maul back in the Star Wars universe, but never on the big screen. They brought him back in the books and the animated series and whatnot. Whatever, I don't care. It's not the same. Boba Fett, I'm sure, in fact, I know he's been brought back, and I just don't understand. Like you said, what a cool-looking villain, what a cool-looking set of armor, what a cool-looking concept. Darth Maul, great character, great Sith Lord, and he's gone, it's over. So,
yeah, maybe one of the only few things that could possibly be wrong with Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, you know what? I'll give you that. If anybody wants to get critical of this movie, fine. Let's talk about how they screwed over Boba Fett. So, all right, I think I'm done now. Let me think. Yeah, I'm pretty much done. So, yes, as you said, a lot of great callbacks here. Luke and Leia are swinging across. So basically, our heroes get to safety. Jabba and his barge are detonated. There's nothing left, man. It's blown to pieces. So one of the greatest criminal underlords of all time, criminal gangsters of all time in this universe anyway, he's DOA, man. It's over. So the droids are rescued. And you would think that maybe our heroes would be sticking together, but they're not, because Luke's on his way back to Dagobah. He reminds R2 that he's got a promise to keep to an old friend. Han and Lando and Leia are off to see the rebels. Yes, they are off to the Alliance. So now we get Luke going back to Dagobah. And as Greg alluded to earlier, Yoda is not in the great shape that he was when we saw him in Empire. He's no longer the spry 890-some-year-old character that he was then. Now he's 900 years old and whatever he was. So, yeah, he's essentially on his deathbed. Luke, again, and, we said this about the Yoda character in Empire, man. The thing that made this work is not only the voice work by Frank Oz, obviously, not only the work done to make him look realistic, like a real actual living, breathing creature, but also the way the actors interact with him, and Mark Hamill interacting with him makes it feel real. It doesn't feel like he's talking to a puppet. It feels like he's talking to a creature. And he tells him, Master Yoda, you can't die. And, it's like Greg said, it's a pretty emotional thing. But what really gets you is when, he says, but I came back to complete the training. And Yoda says, already know you that what you need. So Luke says, oh, so I am a Jedi. And Yoda gets this, like,
yeah, he raises his eye and says, wait a minute, don't go too far yet, Luke. Don't get that big head. There's still a trial you have to face.
Yeah.
And I respect the fact that Luke wanted to come back and fulfill the promise he made in Empire to finish his training under the tutelage of Yoda. So, yeah, Luke has come a long way, and he's such a great character, such a great hero. This is another facet to that. And, yeah, just to see when he's asking Yoda, for confirmation, is Vader my father? And Yoda he's like, I need to rest. He's trying to ignore Luke at this point.
Right.
He doesn't want to tell him, but eventually he does, and he says, yeah, I see you found out the hard way. You know, you left too early. Says you should have stayed with your training, but it's okay now. You've become a Jedi, pretty much, just about. Just to see the look on Luke's face there as, you know, he realizes, okay, Vader is truly my father. That's a big moment, man, because the look in his eye, you can really feel it. And as he, witnesses the death of Yoda, again, it's a tearful moment. He feels like there's still stuff that Yoda can teach him, but, it's done. Yoda's going to go rest. He's going to go high on that mountain now and rest. So he says Luke's got to face Vader one more time.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to be told that, By the way, your old man, who's by far the most powerful villain in the history of villains, you're going to have to go fight him. And good luck this time, pal. So, yeah, he's... I mean, because Luke's in better shape now than he was in Empire in terms of his training. We don't know how he is, because evidently he didn't get any more training between Empire and Jedi, but suddenly he's much more reserved. He's much more confident. He's calling himself a Jedi, and he's dressed differently. He's got all this confidence in the world, and we're never really told how all that happened. And again, there's a lot of stuff out there from the extended universe in terms of books and, novelizations and comics and short stories and whatnot. I'm sure at some point they've explained this, or someone's attempted to. So maybe it exists out there. I have no doubt it probably does. But for the purposes of us watching this movie, we're never really told how he's suddenly, so confident. But, it's not a game changer for me. I understood it, and I understood that time has passed, and he's had the opportunity to reflect upon himself, reflect upon the situation, his own mistakes. Had he stayed with Yoda, could he be in much better shape now to take on Vader? The answer is yes. But, it is what it is. But, like you said, man, Yoda tells him the deal. Yoda also tells him that or at least he attempts to tell him that there is another Skywalker. So as Yoda dies and he leaves, his body disappears, which we will see later with Luke, actually, in the Disney trilogy. So, yes, Yoda is gone. Luke steps outside of the hut and is confronted by the Force ghost of Ben Kenobi. They have a conversation. And Luke's not happy. Yo, man, what the freak? I had no idea Vader was my old man. What's going on? And Ben defends the decision not to tell him. He's like, what I told you was true from a certain point of view. And you're like, at that point, I'm with Luke. I'm like, all right, that's enough. Stop talking in riddles and just give it to me straight, which is something the Jedi often do. They talk around the answer instead of just giving you the answer. It's very Jesus-like in terms of he would answer a question with a question. You're like, dude, just answer.
I was just about to make the mention of Jesus talking in parables. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi talking in like a parable. He said he told Luke basically part of the truth. It really wasn't a lie that Darth Vader murdered his father, even though it was the same man. He just became, more machine and became a different entity. I love this line by Obi-Wan when he's talking to Luke, to explain this. He says, many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. So, I mean, that's awesome right there.
Yeah, like you said, he's slow dancing around it, and Luke's upset. Maybe not as upset as he would have been in the other two films because he was a hot-headed young farm boy, as we said before. But now he tends to take it on the chin. He tries to be a little bit more understanding than he was before, which is a good thing because he can't go into this thing with Vader, going off the deep end, or he's not going to last very long for sure. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. So from here, we are going to the Rebel Alliance. We see that Lando is there. Lando's looking good, man. Lando's got a cape. I'm sorry. Billy D in a cape's doing it for me, man. I mean, first of all, he's the most suave and debonair character in the entire Star Wars universe. But now, ladies, He's got a cape to go with it. So,
he actually looks the part, and I love the color there, man. It's like a light blue.
Yes.
And it's he just looks perfect. He looks like he's the suave, smooth gentleman that you saw in Empire now.
Yeah, and he's exactly what you'd expect Billy D to be, which is who Billy D is in real life. I mean, can you imagine how many capes this guy has in his closet right now? Are you kidding me? So, yeah, we get to see him, and Solo, Han is now a general, Lando's a general, Leia's a general, everybody's a general. Because I don't know how they hand out ranks in the Rebel Alliance, but evidently all you got to do is just show up and work for a little while. You get to be a captain, then general. So
all you have to do is have some courage and a little bit of fortitude, and you're there, man. If you're part of the team, you're a general.
That's right. So just play your cards right, everybody, and you too one day can be a general in the Rebel Alliance. So I got hopes and dreams, man. I'm just saying, I'm working toward the goal for sure. So yeah, it's good to see them together, man. Everybody's happy, healthy, and safe, which is always a good thing. Han's got his eyesight back. That's even better. And he and Lando are getting along. I mean, Han could be upset with him all day long. Yes, none of this would have happened had it not been for Lando's betrayal. But as we said in Empire, we kind of took Lando's side because at the end of the day, Lando didn't really have much of a choice. Vader would have killed him and everybody in Cloud City had he not done what he wanted him to do for him. So Lando made the best of a bad situation, and he did go to rescue his friend in the end, which is the right thing to do. So, as we said, Han is very grateful, I'm sure. I'm sure everyone is upset about the way it went down, but the right thing happened in the end. So,
and here we have a situation where Lando is trying to do the right thing to redeem, what he was forced to do in Empire. So he's trying to give back. He's not just screwing over Han and his friends. He's actually trying to do the right thing here, and I like that in his character.
Absolutely. And man, Calrissian, this is how you earn your place in the Rebel Alliance, folks, is doing the right thing and fighting the Empire. And you prove your mettle and prove your worth, yeah, you're going to be part of the Rebels. So we get to see Mon Mothma. She's speaking she's speaking at a funeral. There's no smile on this woman's face at all. So yeah, she's there. She's speaking. She hands it off to Admiral Ackbar. Yes, he's a lobster, and yes, it's awesome. And Admiral Ackbar is in between every word because he's got that crazy breathing things he's doing, and it's not as ominous as Vader's breathing apparatus, but it's still fun. So
yeah, another great character that they introduced in this film. And, kind of like the pig-headed guards that you talked about earlier.
Yes.
Admiral Ackbar became one of the most famous, iconic characters in Star Wars history.
And we're going to tell you why, because that happens later. So Ackbar and Mon Mothma do reappear in the Disney trilogy, which is great because it was good to see both of them back. Very cool touch there. So, yeah, we get to see them here. And basically, Ackbar is saying that Calrissian is going to lead the attack. They're going to try to get through the defense shield, which is being generated, by the way, for the Death Star on a small moon called Endor. So, yes, it's being generated from the forest moon of Endor, is the way they put it. So Han's like, good luck, you're going to need it. He's like, well, all we got to do now is get a craft to Endor to take out the shield generator. And like, wonder who's going to do that. It's like, General Solo, is your strike team assembled? And everyone's like, holy crap, it's Han. So
yeah, everybody looks at Han, and Leia, is so shocked. She can't believe it because she still kind of remembers the guy that Han used to be that would run from a fight. And this new Han has this is the guy that she's fallen in love with. And, she puts her arms around him. It's a great moment.
And not to get off too far into the weeds on this, but here's where I'll bring this point up. A lot of people had a huge problem with the way Han was portrayed in The Force Awakens. And we know The Force Awakens is technically episode 7 of the series, right? So, and the problem they had was he went right back to life as normal. He's got the same outfit on. He and Chewbacca are still in the Falcon. Actually, they don't get the Falcon until later in the film, right? But they're still kind of hanging out together. They're smuggling. They went right back as if he had never joined the Rebel Alliance. A lot of people had a problem with that. And I can't say that hit me in the first viewing of that film, but when I watched the film again, I kind of did start thinking, wait a minute, this guy was a general in the Rebel Alliance, a trusted leader. Why in the world would he just split? Even if his son had went heel and became Kylo Ren. Who cares? He still had responsibilities. Like you said, he had changed. He was no longer the guy that would run from the Empire when he had to. No, he was doing the right thing. So what in the world would make him go back to life before as if none of this ever happened? Just such an odd thing to do for him.
Yeah, it's a great point. I haven't really thought about it too much, but it makes sense. Why would he go back to his old life when he's got so much of a better life now with Leia, and it was because of all their problems, I guess,
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's, as we said, folks, we may tackle the Disney trilogy at some point, but yeah, I felt like it was worth mentioning for this film especially. So, yes, we know that there's going to be some moves on the Rebels' part. They're not going to sit idly by and watch this Death Star be completed. They can't. They can't. Because if the Death Star Part 2 is done, then game over. Because they won't be ready. So they're going to try to nip this thing in the bud before it's even finished, which is the right thing to do. For a change, the Rebels are going on the offensive instead of the defensive. And they're not going to wait for this thing to be completed. They're going to go full force out. So we're going to move ahead here. Yes, we know that Han and company, and by the way, Luke is back. He's joined them. And Leia knows immediately that something's on his mind. He's like, ask me again later. He's not going to show up. Hey, good to see you guys. Leia, my sister. Let's go do this. All right.
Yeah. It's great that, they saved that part for later on in the film right before he goes to face Vader. It's perfect timing. And, it would have really, it would have really ruined the movie, I think, at that point, just to come in and, just say that right there, then and there in front of everybody. It's something personal between brother and sister.
Well, kind of like the tongue kiss they had in Empire, but we're not going to talk about that. So,
ooh, yeah.
Hey, I'm just saying, man, it happened. You can't do revisionist history. You can add all the special effects in the world, but you didn't take that kiss out, did you, George? So, yeah. So while everyone's feeling a little uncomfortable, let's continue with the breakdown. So the only way for Han and company to get onto Endor, they're on this Imperial ship. They have to give this code. And yes, they tell Vader they're using an older code, but it does check out. Vader knows automatically Luke's aboard the ship. Luke knows Vader's aboard that ship. And it's like, holy crap, family reunion time. None of us want to be here. And I forgot to bring the potato salad. That's how bad this thing's getting, folks. So
yeah, it's extremely awkward here. Luke feels like he's endangering the mission by just being there. But, Vader senses Luke on that ship. And this is what Vader wants. He wants Luke to come in. He wants to draw Luke in. That's his and the Emperor's goal, to try to, bring him to the dark side. So Luke's coming right in as Vader wants.
Yeah, that's true. And they're on the way, man. They clear them. They go through. Han's like, I told you it'd work, which is not true because he was very doubtful the whole time. But like you said when we started this thing, man, that's the comedy of Han coming to the forefront. So, yes, they're going to Endor. And this is, all right, so Endor is a sticking point for a lot of fans because of one very important factor. It's the Ewoks. So, tell me, Greg, how do you feel about the inhabitants, the native inhabitants of Endor? Are you pro or anti-Ewok?
I'm going to be honest and say I'm pro Ewok. I thought it was a great touch when I was a kid, of course. Being a kid, that was something, really cool and cute to see the interaction between that first Ewok and Leia. She thinks he's cute and everything after, she makes peace with him, of course, and kind of communicates. But yeah, I'm pro Ewok. I don't really have a problem with these characters. I thought it was a nice touch myself.
Well, I have to say I'm pro Ewok as well. I don't get the massive heartburn that a lot of fans have. As we said, folks, a lot of the fan base is toxic. If you're one of them, please stop listening to our show because you're part of the problem. I said it. I don't even care. So yeah, man, I'm fine with the Ewoks. I get why people have an issue with them because yes, they're lovable little teddy bears, and yes, once again, Lucas had to bait the kids in. In the first, Star Wars, they used 3PO and R2 for that. In part 2, it was Yoda, and now it's the Ewoks. I totally get it. I know the argument against it, and I don't care. We get to see the speeder bikes on Endor, and we get to see a different kind of stormtrooper. We see a few different kinds of stormtroopers in the course of this trilogy. We saw the snowtroopers on Hoth, which we'd never seen before. We get to see the Imperial Guard for the first time, who are guarding the Emperor when he arrived on Death Star Part 2. And now we see the jungle troops here. And they're on the speeder bikes, and something very cool happens. Luke and Leia end up on the same bike. Han's left to kind of fend for himself. There's a huge speeder chase going through here, and it's pretty freaking awesome. And it's another proof positive point that if this were real, you wouldn't last on this thing for 9 seconds. You'd be dead. Right?
Yeah, I mean, they're speeding through the forest, and these trees are just whizzing by them, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, I would have crashed right after takeoff because, I mean, how fast are they going? They're going almost the speed of light, it seems. And, I guess maybe with with Luke and Leia, possibly they're using the Force. Luke's probably maybe using the Force here. Leia, not knowing that she has the Force, is possibly, drawing that out of herself. So, yeah, that's the only thing I can think of that's maybe possibly keeping them from crashing against the trees. And, let me go back to your point about the variations of the stormtroopers. I really like the fact that they did that because, just to have the same stormtrooper through all 3 films, it's great. They look cool, but I like that they did some variations into the armor and the Red Guard. That was pretty sweet. So, yeah, it's another dimension to the Empire and the stormtroopers.
Because each set of armor has its own functionality. It has its own purpose. It doesn't protect too much from blaster fire, however, because it's pretty easy to kill these guys. We established an Empire. They're pretty easy to kill. And they're kind of like a bunch of dunderheads. But, you need the villains to be like that. They need to be easily killed. I mean, this needs to be, it's Hitler leading the Nazi troops who are easily shot and killed. I mean, it's got to be that way, right? So, yeah, like you said, it's cool to see them in different sets of armor for different reasons, for different purposes in the course of this movie, especially different reasons to see them do what they do.
Nice Karl Malone reference there. Do what they do.
Hey, man, we got through all kinds of pop culture references throughout these shows. That's how we do, man. Yeah. And
let me just say that by this time, the third film, I had finally realized that the guys, these were not robots. They were actually living, breathing people inside the suits. So, yeah, I finally figured it out.
Well, I can't say it took me this long to figure it out because as we said in episode 4, which is, of course, our Star Wars episode, I kind of knew then because they're making small talk aboard the Death Star. And it didn't make sense to me that robots would have small talk. It just wouldn't make any sense. So, yes, I can't say it took me that long to put it together. But, yeah, you're right. These are definitely guys in suits. They're easily killed. And I don't know if we ever saw troopers bleed. We don't see that till the Disney trilogy. And I keep referencing that set of movies. Maybe we'll get to it one of these days, man. But, yeah, we don't really see troopers bleed in the course of the original trilogy. So, what we do see is Leia getting thrown from her bike. Luke had to do some sort of defensive maneuvers and to outrun the other troops, and they basically kill all of them, take them out. So he goes back and finds Han, Chewie, and the droids, but there's no Leia. And yes, you alluded to it earlier, we get to see Leia meet the Ewok that we come to know as Wicket. And yes, I named our dog Wicket because when my kid was really little, it was gibberish. I'm sure you remember this. You couldn't understand a thing he was saying. We could. But he was slow to get his words formed the way they needed to for anybody else to understand him. So I said he sounded like an Ewok when he talked. So, of course, when we got a dog, we named him Wicket. It just seemed to make sense. So
yeah, it's pretty awesome. I love interacting with Wicket, too. He's a great dog. He's very lovable. He likes attention as well.
Yes, he is. He may actually be as lovable as the original Wicket here in this movie. And as we know, Wicket was played by the great Warwick Davis, who also played Willow. A very accomplished actor in his own right. Yes, man. And he did great in this because he acted like a kid, didn't he? It was like, if you didn't know anybody, you'd say Warwick was maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old here when he approached Leia. He was very much on his guard, scared to death, had a spear, didn't trust her for anything, and she actually gives him some food, which calms him down immediately. So it's a cool little scene. I actually like this a lot.
When a kid is crying upset, you got to try to alleviate that. And I guess Leia felt the best way to do it, to offer that olive branch in the form of a piece of food. And it really worked. They formed that initial bond. And, it was really great.
Yeah, like I said, I like this scene a lot. I still do. And they bond right there. As you said, they bond big time. And Wicket ends up hearing something. And, of course, we know it's a trooper. And so he shows up, and he's got his blaster drawn on her. And he doesn't see Wicket has slid down underneath the tree. And he grabs him by his leg. And, of course, in typical Stormtrooper fashion, he goes, "What the?" Like, it's like slapstick comedy here, these guys. You know what I mean? Instead of, "Hey,"
They're kind of like the Keystone Cops, I guess you could say.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Except they're in white instead of black. Yeah, good point. So from here, we are still with Han and Luke. They're trying to track Leia. They find the helmet. We don't know what's happened to her because she and Wicket have taken the trooper out and they go off together. But we don't know what becomes of them after that point. So again, we see Han and Luke and Chewie and the droids. And they end up in a trap. And they're hanging high in a tree. And when they finally cut themselves down, the Ewoks come up from everywhere. There's like 100 of them. And they've got them surrounded. And Han's at first laughing because they're lovable little teddy bears. And then he gets ticked off because they're shoving spears in his face. And Luke's like, "Hey, it'll be all right. Just relax. No worries."
Yeah. There goes Chewie, as Han says, always thinking with his stomach.
Yes.
He's another fine mess he's gotten him into. But, yeah, that scene, that was a pretty cool scene as well, because it just reminded me of, like, say, an American going over to a foreign land and, getting trapped there by the natives. They're all pointing their spears right at them, and, it's very uneasy at first. It's cool because Han says, "Hey, point that somewhere else."
Right, and we can't forget to mention what happens also in the midst of all this. We see Vader, and he is there with the Emperor, and the Emperor's like, "Thought I told you wait on the command ship." He's all ticked off at him, right? And Vader's like, "Look, there's a landing party that's on Endor." And he's like, "Yeah, I know." The Emperor's he already knows. And you're like, okay. And you don't piece that together, at least I didn't. I didn't piece this together at the beginning. It's like, wait a minute, how does he know? Oh, it doesn't matter. He's the Emperor. He's super smart. No, he's not. He had the whole thing. Well, I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, the whole thing is not what it seems. And Vader basically tells him, "Look, my son's there." And the Emperor's like, "Funny, I didn't feel anything." He's like, "Are you sure? You sure it's not the roast beef you had for dinner that's coming back on you?" And Vader's like, "No, that was pretty good. I'm pretty sure about this." So yeah,
at this point, you kind of, watching it for the first time, I kind of thought, was the Emperor this omnipotent? Is he like a god? Can he foresee the future? Yeah, and Vader is almost taken aback a little bit. Yeah, it's like, and then the Emperor asks Vader, "Are you beginning to feel a little bit of sentiment here?" And Vader says no. Of course, he's got to be on guard with the Emperor.
Yeah, he's like, "You getting a soft spot for this kid or what?" So, listen, I'm just translating the Star Wars language here for folks maybe who haven't seen this movie. In other words, if you've been living under a rock most of your adult life, or if you're just stupid, haven't seen Star Wars, I mean, we feel bad for you. I don't feel that bad for you. I think it's kind of pathetic, actually. But in case you need a refresher course, again, we're just doing our job here and translating the movie for you. So, we're back to Endor, and yes, they don't know what's going on. The Ewoks have them captured. And at this point, 3PO sits up. They automatically are taken aback. And they begin to bow down and start chanting and worshiping him. They're like, "What's going on?" 3PO's, they think I'm some sort of god. Which makes Han's day, as we all know, because he loves 3PO. So, that was a joke.
Yeah, it was funny. He gets that smile on his face, that sarcastic smile, and says, "Well, Your Highness," or whatever he says. He says, "Why don't you use, your power and get us out of this?"
Yeah, and he says it's against my programming to impersonate a deity, which makes Han want to get up and bash his head in with a rock, which makes the Ewoks draw down on him big time. So the next time we see our heroes, they're being led away, hogtied, by these Ewoks who were lovable teddy bears, but now, guess what they're going to do? roast them over an open pit, okay?
Yeah, they're the guests of honor for dinner, but they are dinner. They become dinner suddenly, and Han's there trying to put out. He's trying to blow out that flame, that torch, which he's going to be roasting over. He's starting to feel the heat, I guess you could say.
How do we go from lovable Ewoks to disgusting carnivores, cannibals? How'd this happen?
Yeah, talk about can't judge a book by its cover. These Ewoks were very deceiving. And let me just go back to when C-3PO is mistaken for a god with these little lovable creatures. It reminds me of the story of when Cortez and his band of explorers came across the Aztecs. Well, the leader, Montezuma, I guess because of certain coincidences, began to believe that Cortez was the return of a major god of theirs called Quetzalcoatl. Yeah, it just reminded me of that story.
That's good stuff, man. That's a deep cut right there. Honestly, if try to put yourself in a situation where it's a primitive language, primitive way of life, and then you see something like this show up, and you're like, oh my God, this must be a god, because look at him. What's funny to me is that they didn't look at R2 as being a god at all. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, R2 may not have been gold, but he's still made of metal, and he's still colorful, and he's still not human or a creature. But they're just like, yeah, whatever this thing is, I don't care. And then 3PO says something like, holy, it's Jesus, So
yeah, maybe the fact that C-3PO is golden in color, I don't know. Maybe you associate that with the light, or like Cortez and his band were going in search of gold. So there's another connection, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, good. I'll take that. I'll take that as a reasonable explanation why R2 is not God material. Yes, kids, these lovable Ewoks are about to have some din-din. It's not going to be pretty. But before they can start digging in, Leia's there. Leia's wearing something that's not what she showed up in, and her hair's braided, and it's brushed out, and her makeup is on point. We don't know how this happened. And no, I'm not hating on it because I love her. We all know this. But man, how things change suddenly in the movie for no good reason, and you never get an explanation of how or why. It is what it is. But she basically is like, look, these are my friends. You got to let them go. So then Luke tells 3PO, look, man, tell them if they don't let us go, you're going to get angry and use your magic. He's like, well, I can't possibly. Like, just do it. So yeah. He does, and 3PO gives him this speech, and it ends with boom, which is great. And they're all like, oh, and then suddenly 3PO is rising up in his chair. These Ewoks are crapping themselves, and it's not pretty. But they suddenly are like, all right, untie him. Let's just, listen, we're sorry. This was a huge misunderstanding. Please don't kill us. Yeah, so it worked.
I'd like to point out the fact that C-3PO's initial attempt to seem like a god to these little creatures, to be, say he's going to lash out in anger, didn't work. So Luke had to use his Jedi mind powers to lift C-3PO up in that kind of throne-like chair, and that's what got the Ewoks really scared. And they were very agreeable with this crew.
Oh yeah, for sure. They had to have proof, man. They had to be proven that this stuff was real. They had to see it for themselves, and they sure did. So yes, they see it, and then all is well. They're all getting along. They're one big happy, hairy family, and everybody's fine with each other, and it's all great. And 3PO is essentially what we figure out. 3PO is telling them the story of the Rebel Alliance and their fight against the Empire. And he's doing the sound effects and the voices and Vader's breathing and the sound of the lightsabers and the TIE fighters and the X-Wings. And it's pretty great stuff here. And when he's done, he announces to the rebels, to our heroes here, that guess what? They're going to help. And we're like, they're fuzzy teddy bears. How could they help? But then you're like, wait a minute. They were just going to eat these guys, so maybe they could do something after all.
Yeah, and I love the scene where C-3PO's, pretty much summarizing the story of the rebellion. It kind of just made me think of maybe the story of the night before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas. Yeah, he's just going through all the, what the adventures up until that point, and it seems like these Ewoks are, they're like little kids, like we said, and they're really they're just eating this stuff up. Like certain points they're, like they're cringing or they're ducking. They're going along with the story, kind of like a child would do.
Great point, man. Yeah, for sure. Primitive is the word. That's why that they appear to be like children, because it's a primitive species. Like their exposure to technology, if they've ever had any, has probably been so limited. They may not even know that technology even exists. They knew enough to sabotage one of the speeder bikes and take off with them. They knew enough to get the thing started and get kicked off, but they may not have known anything other than just simple machines, maybe, is what we're trying to gather from this. But yeah, as you said, they don't really know what's going on, and they're easily impressed or easily scared or easily angered, which makes complete sense. And something that Lucas mentioned that happens later in the film, when it was criticized for, so the Ewoks could actually do this much damage to the Empire, attack these troopers. And Lucas is like, look, the Viet Cong we went to war with in Vietnam were fighting from the trees, for God's sake, and had primitive weapons to use against our army. So what makes us any different? I'm like, wow, that's actually a really good point. It makes total sense. So yeah, as we said when we first started this thing here today, man, I'm pro Ewok because, they help get the job done. But
oh yeah, definitely, they were a crucial part in the taking down of the Empire, the final destruction end of the Empire.
Absolutely. We know that Luke is going to split here. He basically is confronted by Leia, and he tells her everything. Tells her that Vader's there. He senses him. He also tells her that he is her brother, which is all kinds of messed up. But for some reason, she says she kind of always knew it, which is really weird. It is what it is, though. But yeah, man, the bond that's always been there between these two is fully realized here. And yes, they are both on the same page finally as siblings for the first time ever. Luke splits after this. Han comes out, and in typical Corellian smuggler, cowboy, the way about him, I should say, he's jealous. He thinks maybe there's something going on between Leia and Luke, and that will manifest itself later in the film. But Luke surrenders himself to his dad. Dear old Daddy Vader is there, and one of the more curious conversations I've ever seen from Vader, one of the more curious scenes that this character has ever been in, and man, does it lay the groundwork for the end. They have this conversation, looks like, I'm not going to fight you, I'm not going to turn, there's still good in you. And at one point, Vader looks at him and says, it is too late for me, son. And you're like, wow, that was out of nowhere. Do you know what I mean? You could already feel the sentiment, as you said, coming from this guy.
Yeah, his humanity is starting to come back, creep back into that machine, and he's starting to feel human feelings again. I think in a way he really wants Luke to save him from this life, whatever you call it, that he's been living with the Emperor. I think he's been wanting something to come along and take him away from this, and I think Luke is it. When he realized that he had a son, and it turned out to be Luke, the type of person that he is, I think in a way he kind of wanted Luke to come along and save him.
You might be right, because you do start to question this guy after this scene. At least I do, because I'm like, what's going on in this guy? What's going on in this guy's head right now? It's hard to say. But even when the troopers lead Luke away, Vader has this moment where he just stops and just stares off into the distance. You're like, oh my God, I think he's actually thinking about this thing, which is all kinds of messed up. We know it's not over from here. We got a little bit more to go before the end of this film. The rebels are launching their attack. We've got Lando at the helm with Nine Nub, who they're both in the Falcon. We've got Admiral Ackbar on board one of the rebel cruisers. We've got Y-Wing fighters, X-Wing fighters. They're all on the attack. They're all heading toward the Death Star. We're back on Endor, of course. The rebels are doing their thing. Things start to go south for them because the troopers get the drop on them. In the midst of all this, Luke is finally introduced physically face-to-face to the Emperor, who's cackling like an old hen, thinks he's got it all figured out, and he shows Luke the destruction of the rebels because the shield is still up. The Lando and company cannot get through to the Death Star, and the TIE fighters are out in full force, and man, this thing went downhill quick. And the Emperor's basically saying, look at your pitiful little band. And he's all, he's gloating and stuff. And then reveals it was him that let the rebels know that the second Death Star was there. that Endor was there, the shield generator. He's the one that let the cat out of the bag. He planned this whole thing from start to finish. It was all an elaborate ruse, an elaborate trap to get Luke there to begin with. Because in the Rebels, when Lando and company went to turn around from the Death Star, because the shield was still up, there was the Imperial fleet waiting on them. This whole thing was carefully orchestrated to deliver Luke to the hands of the Emperor and to destroy the Rebels in the process. Not a bad master plan, if I do say so myself. What did you think when this happened? I mean, at this point, does it start to look like all hope is lost?
Yeah, it really did. Just to see the Emperor cackling, he's enjoying himself because he finally lets everybody know that he was the mastermind behind all of this. And, you know, those 3 words, it's a trap, that became legendary. That became epic after this film. Yeah, and he's just trying in that moment to really break Luke down, break his spirit, and to get him, he's doing everything he can possibly do to get Luke to turn to the dark side. You know, he's foreseen all this. And, you know, when the plan works for a bad guy for a while, you know, he loves it. He eats it up, and he wants everybody to know that, you know, this was my plan, and it's working. It's worked all the way through as I envisioned. He almost wants to, you know, let you know that he's kind of like a prophet, I guess.
And, you know, he's not a typical villain, because most villains in these movies tell you everything that's going to happen before they do it. It's kind of like the Dr. Evil thing, where Scott Evil's like, why did you close the door? We can't see them. They're just going to escape. And like, this is not how it's supposed to work, Scott. You know, he's trying to defend his plan, but the Emperor's already done all this stuff. You know, the Emperor's like Jigsaw from the Saw movies. We're like, it's already been done. It's too late. It's already over. He's already done it. And you're like, oh my God, this was brilliant. What a brilliant move. Like, to the Emperor, this whole thing is a massive game of intergalactic chess, and he's already on the verge of checkmate. It's already almost over. And the only thing he has to do now is turn Luke, and he thinks it's going to be easy. Not going to be any work to this at all, because he's showing Luke the outcome of this war that's like moments away from ending. And he knows that Luke's going to get ticked off, and Luke's been refusing to take the saber and to open fire and to take the Emperor out. He's been refusing to do it, but now he feels like he has to. So yes, he reaches out his hand, the saber flies to his hand. Before he can strike the Emperor down, Vader lights up, and now it's off to the races, man. It's time to play the feud. It's Vader versus Skywalker, father versus son, battle for the ages. Much better than the fight scene I think that we got in Empire. I can't say it was crazy dynamic like the ones we would get with the young Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul much later on. But man, it was pretty good. And talk to me about this fight scene, man. What are you thinking as these two are going at it?
I thought it was choreographed much better than the first one, you know, and it was good for its time. But of course, from what we saw later on, you know, we kind of looked back and like, man, you know, maybe it wasn't that great. But for the time, it was great because it was son against father, father against son. So it's a real emotional fight. It's like none other that you've ever seen before. And, you know, of course, you know, it continues to go on. And you think at some point, like, man, how's this going to end up? I mean, is Vader really going to kill his own son? Is Luke really going to be able to kill his own father? And, you know, it's like the bond between these two in that moment becomes stronger than anything else, I think. You know, it's like at one point, Luke, you know, he throws down his lightsaber and it's like, at one point, Luke withdraws his lightsaber and Vader tells him it is not wise to let your defenses down, and he crashes again. So, I don't know what it is. Vader has torn in this moment, in this fight. He wants, you know, to redeem himself or be redeemed. But then again, he feels that strong alliance or, you know, whatever to the Emperor. You know, he's been with him for so long now, it's hard to break away. So Vader is torn in this moment, but Luke is very optimistic. You know, he feels like in the end, eventually, the good Anakin will come back. The humanity will come back, and, you know, Anakin will, you know, win over Vader in the end.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments during this scene leading up to the lightsaber duel, during the duel, and after the duel. You can see that, you know, it's getting to Anakin, it's getting to Vader, it's getting to the very core of what this guy used to be when he was human, when he was a Jedi, when he was trying to do the right thing, but he was getting twisted by the dark side of the Force, which is eventually what did him in. And again, folks, we had no idea that another trilogy was on the way. We of course couldn't predict another trilogy after that. So we didn't know about Anakin's true story. A lot of what made this cool, what made this series of films cool, was there's a lot of stuff that wasn't fully explained. You could just leave it up to your own imagination. There have been rumors through the years during these films that it was a woman from the Sith who tempted Anakin to the dark side, which would have made perfect sense. The whole Adam and Eve scenario, but that's not what they chose to go with. So a very different outcome what we got. But again, at the time, we didn't realize what was going on. We were just kind of trying to fill in the blanks ourselves. But yeah, as we said, man, it looks like all hope is lost. We mentioned Ackbar before. Like you said, the great line, it's a trap. He'll always be known for that. Perfect. It's become a meme. I've used it countless times online myself because it's perfect. But yeah, man, it looks like all hope is lost. It's not going great on Endor, but they finally managed to get the drop on the stormtroopers. And even though a legion, in the Emperor's words, a legion of their best troops awaits them, yes, that's true, but they managed to fight back. The Ewoks show up. And yeah, it's a bit of controversy for fans that don't appreciate this scene, but man, it's all out, man. These little creatures are doing their best, and they're doing great. We actually see some Ewoks killed during this scene, which you kind of didn't expect. So it sort of draws, use the word humanity. It draws the humanity out, and you're like, oh man, these things are actually getting killed for the sake of the Rebel Alliance. They're actually trying to help.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't really know what the cost would be or might be, and you really feel sympathetic for those couple of Ewoks that are, injured, and one actually dies, and you see the other Ewok over there, with its head down on the other one's breast, kind of, saying goodbye there in that moment. Yeah, they did their best, and they couldn't. I don't know if the rebellion could have, overcome the Empire without the Ewoks.
I don't think they could have. I mean, obviously they couldn't have, because there was the Imperial Army there waiting on them. So there was no one else, right? This was it. The majority of the Rebel Alliance was in space heading toward the Death Star. This was the only help that they had. And it was a small band of rebels on Endor. Don't know why that happened. Should have been at least a couple hundred of them, but evidently there wasn't. Right? I mean, it seemed like it was kind of doomed to fail to begin with. But, dude, think about it in terms of the Americans versus the British. We were smaller, we were outnumbered, we were outgunned, we were outclassed in almost every way, shape, and form. But it was our grit, our determination that led us over the Brits. And it's kind of what's happening here. The rebels were outclassed, outgunned, outmanned in every way. But it's their determination. It's like, listen, it's do or die today. This is our D-Day. We have to make this happen. It's now or never. Yeah, they had to.
And I also think that the Empire was, overconfident, arrogant, as the Emperor, laughed in his chair and talked about how, the rebellion was going to be crushed and Luke was going to be turned to the dark side. It was just so much conceit there. He couldn't see the forest for the trees, pun intended, about Endor.
Yeah, good point, man. Yeah, because no one thought these little creatures were going to be able to do any good, but they do. Definitely do. They get the shield down, and Lando, you hear Lando say it, the shield is down, let's go. And he looks at Nine Nub, he says, I told you he'd do it. And they're cackling, they're happy, they go in, and we know what happens from here. Vader has Luke down, but Luke fights back, and Luke ends up taking Vader's hand. And the Emperor could not be happy. His plan is coming through to fruition. He doesn't really care if Vader's dead. In fact, he wants it to happen, because he sees it as a natural evolution of the dark side, that, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, all that crap. And this is the way to extend the Empire, but also extend his own life, is to have Luke take over for his father. Natural progression from father to son.
What an awful, old, creepy man. The mentality, he just uses these Siths to pretty much further his own agenda, which, sometimes you think about dictators in the world, that's pretty much what they do. So he was a dictator, he just to use these, soldiers or whatever to further his own ends. And what a crappy guy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Forget the fact he's whole evil. He's evil personified. He's also a crappy douche. That's what he is. So nothing like being a D-bag on top of being the most villainous creature of all time. No, it's the truth. And like you said, his own arrogance, which, Ben warns Luke very early on. Watch the arrogance, kid. Watch the attitude. Watch your mouth, because that stuff leads to the dark side. We see it manifest in the Emperor, whose own ego, like you said, won't allow him to see the possibility of good overcoming evil, because he's blinded by the dark side of the Force, which is why he loses, because it makes perfect sense.
He was never able to foresee this outcome because, like, you just made a great point, blinded by the dark side. And when you're in the dark, you can't see.
Oh, dude, great. Good stuff there. Man, they're going to write songs about this show, I'm telling you. This is great stuff. So, yeah, man, it's all coming to light. Luke looks down at his own electronic hand that Vader took from him in Empire. A weird kind of rhyming is going on here. And Luke, he turns off his saber and he says, I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I'm a Jedi like my father before me. In other words, screw you, pal. I'm not falling for this.
Yeah, that's a great scene. The consummate hero standing up to the consummate villain, the evil guy. And, yeah, it's what you would expect from Luke. And he comes through in shades. That's
right, man. We all know what happens next. Luke flips him off, delivers a stone cold stunner, drinks beer, pours it on him. All right, that's not what happened. It's what we wanted to happen. But the Emperor's like, so be it, Jedi. If you'll not be turned, you'll be destroyed. And boom, electricity out the fingertips. Holy God, where'd this come from? Didn't know he could do this stuff.
Mark Hamill, to his credit, he did a great job writhing on the floor in pain and agony. Man, those screams, wow. It really made you feel like he was in excruciating pain.
Yeah, man. He looks up and he says, Father, please help me. And, he could have said anything. He said, you just going to stand there while the guy does this to me? Come on.
Yeah, it's like, Father, why have you forsaken me?
Oh,
like that.
Yikes. That's true, though, man. That's a good point. Yeah, he could have said anything in that moment. Ow would have been appropriate, I can't believe how much this hurts. I think I just peed myself. Anything like that.
Yeah, but, and as another callback, real quick callback, after Luke, chops Vader's, mechanical hand off, Vader's armor, again, is dusty looking. It looks like it needs to be shined up again. A good callback to Episode 4.
Yeah, good point, because we know the armor underwent physical changes, and like you said, we mentioned this, I think, in Episode 4, where we saw the progression of Vader's armor. It was kind of a dull black, and then it became extremely shiny by Jedi. Yeah, it's so shiny you could see the reflection of the cameras in it, which I'm sure was hard to leave out during that time. But yeah, man, good call. We see the camera cutting back and forth from Vader to the Emperor, from Vader to the Emperor, from Vader to the Emperor, to Luke to Vader to the Emperor, and it becomes obvious something's coming. And Vader, who would have been cool if he just slapped him in the back of the head or something. What are you doing? Knock it off. That'd have been fun. But instead he just picks him up. And the Emperor, for some reason, is, and I'm like, what's wrong? But, looking back on it, I suppose the electricity is going through Vader and then going back up into the Emperor, perhaps. So Vader is conducting the electricity, because there'd be no other reason for the Emperor to be in pain at that point. And then we know what happens. He throws him down the shaft to the reactor of the Death Star there, and the Emperor is dog food. He's toast, kids. He's all done for. And it's like you said, man, Vader has redeemed himself. He has found redemption. He has turned back to the good side. What a moment. Is this as big of a moment as Luke blowing up the Death Star in the first Star Wars, you think?
In my opinion, I think it trumps that moment, because just for the emotional appeal of it. Because when Vader asks Luke to remove his mask, he wants to look upon him with his own human eyes. Man, that really got me. That whole scene, I was crying again. My nose was running. I think it was much worse than the scene earlier with Yoda's death. But yeah, to me, this was the most emotional scene, maybe of any movie ever that I've ever seen, witnessed. And oh wow, it was just, I was overwhelmed in that moment.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. It really is. And Luke didn't want to take the helmet off. He's like, if I take it off, you'll die. Vader says, nothing can stop that now. And when he takes it off, of course, it's not James Earl Jones. That kind of would have been pretty cool if it had been. But it's not him. And the accent is borderline British, if we're being honest. Not so much that it's obvious, but it's borderline. But it's okay. It's all good because he's smiling. And you see the years of the dark side, the toll it took on him physically. You see it all over his face. But he's smiling at Luke. He's like, no, go, leave me. And he's like, I can't. I got to save you. He says, you already have. He said, Luke, you were right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love that scene where, Luke, he's still trying to save him, physically. He's already saved him, spiritually. Now he's trying to save him physically. He says, I won't leave you, Father. You're coming with me. I've got to save you. And then, of course, Anakin at this point, this is Anakin speaking, says, you already have, Luke. You already have. Man, the tears welled up.
I hear you, man. And then the next line kills it, too, is when he says, you were right about me. Tell your sister you were right. Like, great stuff. I got to say, when we saw the first Star Wars, we saw Vader for the first time. None of us could have imagined the story ending this way. What an ending to this film. What an ending to this trilogy. We know what happens next. They go back to Endor. Luke has escaped Death Star with Vader's body. Han tells Leia, I'm sure Luke wasn't on that thing when it blew. She said he wasn't. I can feel it. And Han says, you love him, don't you? She says, well, yes. He goes, I knew it. When Luke gets back, I won't get in the way. She's like, it's not like that at all. He's my brother. And no, I'm not reading from a script. It's all in the head, kids, because I've seen it a billion times. But look, Han has this look like, what? And then he gets it. And he's like, okay, this kind of makes sense now. But at some point, it would have been cool if Han would have been like, dude, you totally tongue-kissed him not too long ago on Hoth. What's going on?
It's like, that's disgusting, Leia.
You're disgusting. I'm rethinking this whole thing now. I don't know if I want any more to do with this,
Yeah, but you can see the adulation on Han's face when he realizes what that means. Leia's fair game now for him. He can pursue her.
Right.
He can pursue Leia.
That sounds so creepy the way you put it. She's fair game now, pal. But I'm telling you, he calls out the tongue kissing incident from Hoth, and suddenly Mon Mothma's looking pretty good to him. So, he goes and asks her out, and they hook up, and it's an entirely different new trilogy after this one, I'm telling you. No Kylo Ren to worry about, which means you don't get episode 7, okay? So, yeah, let's keep that in mind. We could have spared us all from some highly questionable moves in a highly questionable trilogy. But maybe we'll get there. We've not decided yet. Don't hold us to it. Maybe we'll get there. Luke brings Vader's body back to Endor. He gives him sort of like a Viking send-off, I suppose you could say. He lights the armor on fire. We assume the body's in the armor, obviously. So he lights the body on fire, and that's the end of Vader. And they're celebrating. The Ewoks are celebrating. They've got the Nub Nub song going, which Lucas and his moronic people took out of the new editions of the films, which is an abomination in the eyes of God himself. So Greg and I don't have to worry about that because we're listening to the original when we watch the film. And there's hope in the world after all because of that. Because it's a great song.
The originals are the best, and that's what you need to get to watch.
Yeah. And if you need them, holler at your boy. I'll hook you up. So it's good stuff. It's great stuff. Luke kind of wanders off for a sec. He sees the images of the Force ghosts of Ben, Yoda, and yes, not Vader, but Anakin. The thing is with our heroes clapping and singing, Lando's clapping. He's a lazy clap, which I always see. My eye always finds Billy D with a lazy clap. And I don't know why that always gets my attention. It's the one thing my eyes finish on as the screen fades to black every time.
Oh, and I love the 3 Force ghosts of the 3 father figures, one of them biological. They're, greeting Luke with smiles on their faces saying, you did it, kid. You saved us. You destroyed the Empire, which was a long time coming. So, yeah, Luke, you were the hero of the day, and, we thank you. That was a really cool moment, Luke smiling back at them. One of them says real father, and the other 2 were kind of like fathers to him.
Great point, man. I never would have put it that way in my mind, ever. But you left out Uncle Owen, whose Force ghost shows up later and says, What am I, chopped liver? What's going on over here? He didn't have a Force Ghost kids. We made that up. So, dude, great point. I never would have put that together. But yeah, his 3 mentors. Yeah, no doubt about it, man. Great point. So we've reached the end, and it's the end of the movie. And we've had fun with this because we should have, because how do you not have fun with Jedi? How do you not have fun with the Star Wars universe, at least the original trilogy, as much as you possibly can? These are the movies we grew up with, the movies we love, the movies that help mold and shape us into who and what we are today. I can quote these movies off the top of my head like I can anything else I've ever been a fan of. Dude, I'm sorry, talking about it and watching it again for the upteenth time here, I don't care what anybody says. This is a classic. So I'm going to throw it to you. I'm going to see if you agree. Greg, give me your final word. What's your final thought on the Return of the Jedi?
Well, this movie is timeless for me. Every time I watch it, it takes me back to my childhood. I'm a kid again. It makes me laugh and it makes me cry, just like its predecessors. And it's so good. The actors and actresses, they've all made it epic. It's like when you go back and read, say, Homer in the Odyssey. That's what it's like. It's the Homer's Odyssey come to life, and it's the greatest trilogy ever. Let me just say that. Period. And it's the things that spawned after this. This set of movies set the bar so high, that I think maybe only Marvel's Infinity War and Endgame can possibly compare. So yeah, it's just so timeless, and I love it. I can't get enough of it, and I will forever be a fan of this trilogy.
I mean, that's great stuff, and I'm with you 110%. This is the best trilogy of all time. Nothing compares to it. Nothing will ever compare to it. And I'm a fan of a lot of different great, geek culture and nerd culture and pop culture films, stuff that you and I will probably always talk about for years to come. I wouldn't have it any other way. But again, we started this show off with the trilogy. And every time I hear the word trilogy, I will always think of Star Wars, because this is the first, true, and best of all time. Jedi doesn't get enough credit in my estimation. It's a great film. I love this film. Yes, there's some weak points. It's nothing I lose sleep over, because there's no need to, because the end result is so satisfying and it's such a gratifying end to such a well-told story. I thought everything was left in perfect shape. If there had never been another film made, I would have been okay with that, if I'm being honest with you. I would have been okay with comic books. I would have been okay with novels. I would have been okay with everything. I love that we get more Star Wars, for better or worse. I love that chances are the Star Wars universe will always be with us, and our great grandkids 3 to 4 to 5 generations from now will probably still be talking about this universe. That makes my heart happy, because there's a lot of great stuff in this universe to talk about to begin with. A lot of great stuff to enjoy. Return of the Jedi is a blast. I still love it. I still love watching it. And it's one of the films I could watch over and over again. I'm sure I will as time goes on. The trilogy is the trilogy. It's the best of all time. There's no doubt about it. And this film brought everything together the way it should, the way it needed to. And that's why I'm a fan of it now, then, and forever. And that is Return of the Jedi. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.